Today's conversation is around Women's March, women's rights, and we really want to see how activism in Zimbabwe can be used to enhance and amplify the voices of women. So maybe to start the conversation, I'll ask our seasoned author, Ms. Virginia Piri, do you actually think we have a vibrant women's activist movement in Zimbabwe to even begin with?
Yes, we do have, in fact, from all walks of life, but at times we find that people are not so free to participate and are not so free to be identified as activists, but they do activism work all the time, every day. The only problem is not many people want to come out for various reasons.
Okay, maybe Natasha, you have something to add?
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with what you have said, that we do have women activists, but the problem is we are afraid to come out and say our view. We always say this is for men, this is not for women, to the extent that we are not able to stand for other women. So I think that's the problem. I think at this point in time, what we need is to have vibrant women who can stand and say, no matter what happens, I want to fight for those women. And also from other women, I think what is lacking is support. In as much as you want to stand for other women, but they might not support you. So if they're not supporting you, that means you yourself, you cannot stand up. That's what I think.
Okay.
I'm going to speak from a legal perspective. If you look at the evolution of Zimbabwean law with regards to women, the first thing that you have to think about is there was a woman or a group of women who started that conversation. So activism precedes all of us, regardless of age. I'm just basing off of the people who are in this room today. For us to say there is no activism or it's not adequate is an inaccurate, inaccurate analysis of the situation on the ground. There are so many people doing different acts of activism for women. And also just looking at the definition of activism, we also have to think of people who are not very vocal but are doing important stuff within their communities, within their homes. When you say no to harmful practices, when you refuse to be taken advantage of, and another woman sees you do that, that's an act of activism because you're setting yourself as an example for another woman. So unless we're only restricting ourselves to formal activism, there is so much that is being done.
Okay, thank you. I want to agree with what she said because as everyone else was speaking, I was saying, do people really understand what activism is before we even start saying, okay, is there activism in Zimbabwe or whatever? So are people on the ground, the urban woman, the rural woman, understanding exactly what activism is before we even start saying, oh, you're an activist? Because in the Zimbabwean setup, it's those people who go out there and are loud about certain issues that are only regarded as activists, but the people who are doing work, saving one life at a time just by speaking out or acting against certain things, but they're not recognized, and we aid to that, because if it's not loud out there, then to us it's not activism. So I think it starts from there. What really is activism?
Okay, so maybe I'll throw it back to you guys. What then really is activism? Because to me, activism is going in the streets and making noise and, getting as much coverage as we can get and pushing for emotion, or maybe there's more to activism than what I, as the layman, would probably take it as.
Well, the word activism is a recent word. I was born in 1954, and I grew up in a family of activists, from my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my grandmothers, my aunts, and everybody. They stood for the people, for the rights of the people, whether it was food, whether it was freedom, whether it was education, whether it was religion, or whatever it was. It's always been there, but it has been done long before even we call it now activism, because we've put the jacket activism in our own communities as black people, in that village, in that township, in that farm, in that whatever, in that informal sector. people to people. They've got different names of doing. We are calling it activism because it's fashionable. I'm not quite sure, but people are silent. Like the young lawyer said, it has always been there, and we have to carry on, and it's nothing new. Really, it's nothing new. It's always there. You don't want to say it, it's unfortunate, but it's there.
I think I'd also have to agree with what Danai said about activism being silent. As long as you're speaking for someone that can't do it for themselves, as long as you're a voice, even if it's one person that you're speaking out for, I think that's activism. As long as you're helping someone, I think.
Okay, just to contribute to this conversation, if we're looking at, because I'm a legal person, most of my examples are going to come from the law. If we're looking at our inheritance law, we think of the story of Venia Magaya. She was a daughter in a family, a polygamous family, and upon the death of her father, she was told that she could not inherit. And the first thing she did was to try to find out why she couldn't inherit. If you look at her, the first word you would use for her is not an activist or a feminist or nothing, because it's maybe formalized, but she went and wanted to understand why as a woman she could not inherit when she was the eldest child according to the sequence of inheritance. And because of that, there were women lawyers and different women from different organizations who came together and started advocating for the change in our inheritance law in the country. So acts of activism should not be limited to the final act of people going into the streets to march against something. There is a woman who comes as an example. If she believes that whatever is happening to her should not be happening, or there must be amendment to the way she is being treated, then that could be regarded as an act of activism because she is refusing to conform to something that discriminates against her humanity. So when we speak about activism, we need to open up our minds to the very beginning of the act, Venia Magaya, and then we now look at our inheritance law from 1997, which no longer are based on male primogeniture, which says the male heir should inherit. Now spouses are inheriting, and now property grabbing is illegal. You cannot loot from a deceased estate. All this was because a woman went and spoke out against that act. So activism goes beyond the final act. It's about the beginning. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Okay, so maybe then this brings me to another part of the discussion where I'm asking, so can we really have a vibrant activist movement in conflict situations where the rule of law has been suspended and everyone is doing everything? Can we actually say there is space for women's rights to be upheld? And then I am looking at you. No, it's fine.
Yes, apart from the law, we also have people who are not legal-minded. The ordinary people, they also use the tools that they have to use, women especially. You know, most of them will say they didn't go to school and all. That's not their fault, but they are actually brains out there who are able. A lot of activism also, I'll talk of myself as a writer. We have done a lot of work on women's, activism through books. The books in Shona, for instance, my books like Zimbabwean Writers Masimba, that was a pseudo project on all forms of discrimination against women. There was also in Ndebele, Vusinkope, and many other. Using writing as activism has actually turned things around. We actually, as Zimbabwean writers at that time, I'm a founder member and I'm still a writer through that, where the tragedy of lives researched went into women's prisons. The spaces in those prisons were not meant for women, but that book actually has helped, even not only in Zimbabwe, in the Ministry of Justice and all that. It has changed things, and it revolutionized the prison space for women, and people became aware. That's activism. So in other words, writing and journalism and all forms of photography or whatever it is, it can also be used. I now come from the silent without using my mouth, without going in the street. I use my pen. We've all heard. The pen is mightier than the sword. So it does work for women, even those women who cannot actually physically write. They can narrate a story, we record it, we write it, we put it out there. The writing has actually revolutionized women's movement, women's activism, made the space of women. I mean, all those, they are all in the legal. If you go through, you'll find out a lot has been done by the ordinary women, even rural women, women who can't even speak English, and translations have been made. So in other words, writing is a very powerful tool. And also, for those who are not quite comfortable to come out and say something, they can use writing.
Yes, I would like to think that we can have active activism, but one thing we need to remember is that women are not a homogeneous group. So we need to bear in mind, and we need to remember that the urban women, the rural women, there are women with disabilities and all of that. And in order to have a successful activist movement, we need to cater to each and every woman. We shouldn't look at it as one solution or one formula fits all. We need to make sure that everyone is catered for.
Yeah, I would say there's really a space for women. I think I would like to take it from a human rights perspective to say we can't say we have human rights without including women. So I think looking at the situation in our nation, I think what we need to consider is if we empower women, and us as women, if we stand up and say things as they are, I think even as nation we are going to develop. We are going to have from this, we are going to move from this point we are to another point. Because if you look at it from all, if maybe we can talk about all the national building that have been done, the reason why we are still going back is because we are not including women. So I think us as women have to stand up and go where we are supposed to be. So there is really space for us women, and us women, if we stand up, that means we are going to have a powerful nation. That's what I think.
Before I answer your question, I just wanted to maybe endorse or reiterate what was said by Virginia with regards to documentation. So maybe there might be perspectives about activism because people were not always documenting their actions, and some people do not even document, but it is important to document so that you can have a blueprint for people who are going to continue the work and to encourage people, and so that we do not continue doing the same things. We need to evolve and modernize. If you look at the document for International Women's Day about balance for better, it's about finding innovative ways to improve the status of women in our countries. So documentation gives us a blueprint, it gives us lessons. And then to answer your question, which is about the role of activism in conflict situations, especially where the rule of law is suspended. First of all, is this a safe space?
It's very safe.
Okay, activism can happen in conflict situations. If we, from a, okay, I do not have a dictionary, but from my understanding of activism, we can break it down to action, right, and intended outcome. So the action exists. If there's a conflict situation and from the shutdown, there were reports that women were raped, or there are allegations from women that they were being raped by members of the army. And then there were different activists who were coming into play. Some people were giving shelter, regardless of whether or not it was an organization, it was an actual person giving shelter to another woman who's in danger. You know, people were raising awareness on the fact that rape was happening or was alleged to have been happening during the shutdown. So activism does have a space. But the thing is that within our activism, we want to see results in change. Looking at our present situation, maybe just looking at the issue of the shutdown as an example, if you are from a legal perspective and you want to help somebody, a person comes to you and tells you that they were raped by a person that they cannot identify. Already there is something that is hindering the progression into the formal justice system because you cannot identify the perpetrator. Therefore, there is nobody to try should the matter be taken to court. I do not even think the matter can even pass through the vetting process because the accused person is not available. And then we have maybe international remedies that we could go for, like the International Criminal Court, but Zimbabwe is not a signatory. So when it comes to that, as an activist within the legal field, I feel bound by the situation on the ground because whereas we want people to get their remedy through formal access, formal justice system, we also have to think about the feasibility of the remedy that we would like to bring. But then we are not limited to one mode of intervention. There are people who can provide psychosocial support. So those people will come into play. Even if we do not have a remedy at law at present for people who cannot identify the perpetrators of whatever pain they went through, we have people who they can speak to and help reintegrate into society in a way that helps them to move on. So yes, it exists even when the rule of law is suspended. The problem is that our options become limited where the rule of law is suspended.
Okay, she said a lot. Okay, I think with everything that she says from a legal perspective, that's where it comes in the point of silent activism, because you also need safety for the activists, because as women we're vulnerable at all costs. She gave a very good example about, okay, how safe is this safe space? You're talking about people that deal with certain issues, especially in issues of conflict. Obviously, during that time where things happened and allegations were posted about, we know the people in authority came out and said things about activists and people that were attending to those, that reported those allegations. So, from a legal perspective, Miss Legal, how safe are those people? Because that is where it becomes that suppression. You're saying these people were going to receive help and whatever, but are those people that are, because these are the activists that you're saying they're offering this help to those people, how safe are they in issues of conflict? I think that is where we bring, how safe are these activists, especially women activists, during these times of conflict? And what are we doing as people who are speaking on the role of activism in Zimbabwe in issues of conflict?
Okay. I don't have much to contribute, but just to say, okay, it's on now. Okay. We have a classic example, Justina Mkogo, right? But then we also have other activists who managed to raise issues, particularly issues that incorporate a political element to it that does not necessarily conform to the politics of the day, and they're still okay. So I think it's I don't know, a catch-22. Like, the situation is not always safe. Generally, we must move with the assumption that the work you're doing is not safe, just so that you can take all the necessary precautionary measures. Otherwise, I think that there is though.
Okay, so I guess I'll take this to the floor. Do you really feel, you guys, that activism really works? And if it does, what can you point out to say, this is a best practice and this is a lesson learned? I don't know, any takers? Okay.
Good day to you all. I got the invitation from Tatenda, and I'm really appreciative of the invitation, because by inviting me as a male person, it also shows that building up women is not only on the women's perspective side, but also the male. So I believe that we can build a better future for the women through helping each other. Okay, I just want to say one quote which I know, which my mother always tells me, is that, and I've heard it around, called to Mushamkadzi. I hope I'm correct, right? Yeah. Okay, so what I believe is that in terms of activism in Zimbabwe, what I've seen compared to other countries is that there's been quite a lot of improvement, if I can say, compared to some of the countries where women are totally suppressed. But I've seen that looking at Zimbabwe's situation, I believe that women activism is not being rampant as much as it should be, because most women are not being given that financial literacy which they're supposed to have. So you see that there's a situation where a woman is married, she's in a marriage, and she wants to go somewhere or do a particular business or anything like that. But then they have to ask permission from the husband first. And if the husband does not give the permission, then you see that it's going to be a situation where the woman cannot do anything. And as a result, she's still going to be suppressed. Let's say a woman could have been invited to come to this platform, but she could not make it because maybe she did not have enough funds, or it's that type of thing. So I believe that women activism can be improved in different ways. Because for me, I'm a junior attorney in South Africa. And what I've seen in different situations that come through is that women activism, it is there, but it is not being used as much as it should be. We look at social media. Activism does not mean that you only have to march around the streets and chant and shout, but also through social media, that is one, we have to move with times. We see that social media is one of the most powerful tools that we have, and we have to diverge from the issue of that you're only going on social media to try and please and be trending on different things which are not really okay, but women activism should be pushed. Thank you.
Do we have any contributions from anywhere else? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Charity Mandishona. I'm the current WICOS chapter chairperson for Harare. I think the other barrier for women activism is because now we're in the 4th industrial revolution, where we're looking at technology. And most women, they are not very much up to date with technology, such that it's very difficult for them. Even if she wants to put across a story, she cannot use the social media vis-a-vis even the writing. For her to write a story now, they will look at her as someone of the old age, and she will be like, so she cannot speak out what she needs to. So I think the first step is for women to be trained on the use of social media technology. Thank you.
So speaking about social media, our Facebook handle is at Women's March Harare, so please follow our page. Our Twitter is at Women's March with the capital letter W and ZW at the end. So I don't know, maybe back to our panel, what else can we do? Because we can see that there is a gap and women's rights are still being abused, and we cannot yet speak of equality. So what else do you think we can do as women, as male supporters of our women? What else can we do?
I think the most important thing, we find that we've given an example of women being raped. They're raped by males, whether they're young, old, or whatever, it doesn't matter, but it's a male. The women, especially the young women who are having children now, you have to grow your sons properly so that they understand that a woman is that being which brings life. A woman's body is sacred. And that part that they abuse, rape, is the part that brings life into the world. Once we teach and grow up, or whether they are grandchildren in my case, or children, boys, we are growing males in a different way for them to be able to be proper human beings who respect men, who will not violate, rape, abuse, and do whatever. Let's grow. It's done, unfortunately. Those who we can't turn back, we can't. But those we are growing now as boys, babies, whatnot, let's try and do the best. I think that's very important. It's us women, again, who can do that.
I definitely agree with Virginia. I would definitely say we need to raise awareness, and it needs to start from socialization from a very young age, because what you're taught when you're young is basically who you then become when you grow up. So if you teach people from a young age that, no, this is not how you treat people, this is how you should act or whatever, that would definitely take the activism movement a long way.
Yeah, I think I agree with the two speakers, but from also my own point of view, I think us as women, we have to be united. We have to stand as one thing. Because you find that sometimes if one woman maybe is trying to say this is not good, sometimes you're not being supportive. So I would think one thing that I think really need to be done in Zimbabwe is for us to come together and have one voice and stand against women rights violation is one group.
I'm glad that the rest of the panelists are talking about socialization. Using that example of socialization and what one of the people in the crowd or gallery audience, thank you, one of the guys in the audience said, he said mushamkadzi, and it got me thinking, and I'm open to correction if I'm wrong. I feel that home where people apportion chores to each other. It's these small things that we do, these things that we socialize ourselves to do that are detrimental to us as we grow older. Because this same guy who was used to having his mother do everything for him is going to expect his wife to do the exact same thing that his mother does. And then there's that general sentiment about how men look for their mothers in the women that they date. But for the most part, it's about what the women can do for the men. Where is the conversation about what the men are doing for the women? Because now we're speaking of financial emancipation. Women are going to work now. So what are you saying? If the man is supposed to be the provider and now women are providing, what weight are men also pulling on their own? Accountability is what we need to push so that we socialize every single person to be a global citizen who contributes meaningfully to society.
Okay, I agree with everything that everyone here has said. My angle, though, is a bit more on how we've been conditioned to look at things differently from a male perspective, from a female perspective, instead of looking at things from a humanity perspective. So usually my line of work, you go around, you're raising awareness on rape. First thing you hear a guy says, or sometimes we're wearing these t-shirts that speak on, oh, do not rape or whatever. Guys come up to us and then they're like, you know what, we hate you guys because you're stopping us from, oh, yeah, the consent. These women now, they think that we can't even touch them. Even my own wife can go around and say, I was raped. And I'm always asking, I always stop to look, and then I'm like, so you're already assuming the role of a perpetrator because you're a man, as if men do not also experience sexual assault. Then it's one of those things, it's about how people are raised. From a young age, we teach the boy that he's the perpetrator and the girl is the survivor. And that is a problem because it then grows and it becomes everything that we look at from our eyes. We're thinking, oh, I'm a woman, so I should always move around with this precautionary measures of I should not get raped or how to avoid getting raped. And men are conditioned to think they're the ones that only rape. Yes, in the Zimbabwean term, it's men get aggravatedly, indecently assaulted. But for us, the effects are the same. You can just be assaulted by a woman, but you're also prone to getting HIV, STIs from those same things. So why not speak about issues that are like that affect everyone from a perspective of anyone can get raped? So our activism now should be conditioned to look at things from a gender conscious perspective. Maybe it's high time we stop looking at things from, oh, I'm going to speak to women, oh, let's raise men saying men shouldn't rape. Let's raise them to be conscious about the effects of rape on them too. not just about them raping women. It becomes something that if they grow up and they know if they get raped, it becomes an issue for them. Then when they see the next person, they're looking at them also and saying, oh, if my sister was to get raped, if I was to get raped, I might get HIV, I might get STIs, my sister. So it's no longer just about, oh, it's a men's issue, it's a women's issue. It's everyone's problem, and I think that could work for everyone.
Okay, so maybe just to round the discussion up, our panelists, can we really establish that there is actually something going on the ground, whether documented or undocumented, when it comes to safeguarding women's rights in Zimbabwe and in conflict, or even when there's no conflict? Can we establish that something is happening?
Yes, okay. I will speak from the part of my organization. Something is happening. We are working with women and men every day. We're on the ground. We're speaking this message. And, well, people don't know some of these things because when they speak on activism perspective, they think, oh, we're supposed to be loud out there talking about, oh, okay, there's institutional rape happening and whatnot. But on our perspective, it's what do we consider first? In issues of conflict, we're saying, what does a rape survivor need? I'm an activist. Somebody gets raped, everybody's making noise about it. But what is my concern? I'm thinking a survivor is thinking about their safety. They're thinking about their health. Those things. So if I'm speaking up about those things, that they need to get help within 72 hours and receive treatment, it's an activism that I'm doing. I might not be going out attacking the people that you want me to attack, but that message is going to the right people and they're receiving the help that they need. So let us not look at being reactionary. I think we've been doing that a lot as Zimbabweans. When something comes out, we're ready to get angry and point fingers. But are the people that really need help getting the help that we're talking about? Who are we facing? Are we facing the politics of issues, or are we facing the people that we really need to get the help that we're talking about? And I think the latter is the real activism that we should be focusing on.
I believe that the very fact that we're sitting here as women to speak about women's issues is self-evident of the existence of activism in the country. Even though we are just 5 women here, we're representing so many other women who are doing important work in the world. So yes, there is a blueprint, there is already evidence of activism happening, and I will take it back to the law, the changes within the law, you know, the amendments that are being made to cater to women's issues, the fact that women are doing gender audits to look at whether or not women are being incorporated into the law. We are still vulnerable. We still do not have equal opportunity. There is still so much to be done, but the very fact that something is happening is enough evidence, even if it's not documented.
Yeah, I would say it's there and it's happening. If you look at the situation, the shutdown situation, various organizations have been doing something. But I don't know, I still stand to be corrected. I think the problem we have is we always wait for something to happen and then act after that one. If I think we are here because of what happened during the shutdown. This is now raising people to say, I think we need to do this, I think we need to do this. I think as women activists, why can't we have something that we say, maybe the plans, I don't know what we can do. Not for us to wait for 100 people to be raped, 5 women to be raped, and then we need numbers, and then we need this one. Because for the current situation, for the recent situation that happened, as we were having a discussion with UN Women and other UN agents, we were saying we need to know the numbers, we need to have evidence, we need to have this. So why are we waiting for these things to happen? Why can't we have something that safeguards women, something that protects women, for this thing not to happen? Because each and every year we are having this thing. This thing is continuously happening. Why can't we have something to prevent women from being raped? I think that will be my take. Like, we don't have to wait for something to happen first and the act after that one.
Well, like I said, I use writing and I'm not quite sure if they are coincidences. Right now on my desk, I've got a book which is entitled Robbed of Dignity. I introduced that part of the book in Washington, D.C. last year in May, and I've done research in West Africa and Central Africa about the situation of women, violation, rape and all. I didn't realize that closer to home, these things will happen. And I'm saying, right now, that book is there. Like you just said, do we wait? I was not writing about my home. I was not writing about my region. I was writing, and I use fiction, by the way, as a tool. So, I don't know whether it's a coincidence. In fact, we were talking in African Literary Association Women's Caucus in Washington, D.C. at a session where we called Women's Bodies. That's how I felt comfortable to come out with what I was working on. That's my next book, Robbed of Dignity. So I really had no idea that it will happen in my country, but it has happened. So that's another way things are in motion, not only for Africa, but the world over, for the cause of women in that violation of women, which is very painful. Thank you.
So I guess we can agree that in terms of activism, something is happening, and that activism does not only exist in one form where women are marching and women are making noise, but anyone can be an activist. Anyone can stand up for a sister in the street who's suffering from wolf whistling by the combi drivers. Anyone, you can be your sister's keeper. But I don't want to be the one giving the closing remarks. I'll ask Vera from Incubator Hub to sum up the discussion for us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to everyone for taking part in this discussion. I'm sure there's something that we all can take home with us and that we can go above and beyond and actually talk to more people about what we discussed today, and realizing that activism doesn't mean that we need to go in the streets and burn down buildings, but it just takes one small movement every single day. If we just use one small action that can stand up for our fellow sisters, we can then have a better country, we can have a balance for the better. I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank our partners, 263 Chat, Women's March Harare, B2C co-working space and the American Embassy. And to each and every one of you, thank you so much for coming through today. Please, let's keep the discussion going on Twitter, on Instagram, in our families as we raise our children, as Virginia actually mentioned and everyone else on the panel also mentioned, is that we need to teach our children to be better people. We need to teach ourselves to be better people. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.